10 Shocking Encounters with Feral People in Appalachia You'll Never Forget at Midnight. The chill crawled down Jake's spine like 1,000 icy fingers. Midnight in the Appalachians was a world unto itself, a place where shadows danced among the trees, and the moonlight painted eerie shapes across the forest floor. Rumors swirled like autumn leaves, feral people, lost to the wild. They lived beyond the reach of civilization, lurking just out of sight. As if on cue, a distant howl pierced the stillness, sending waves of dread rolling through the late-night campfire gathering, a group of friends whispering stories to fend off the suffocating silence that he heard the tales. Strange encounters in the dark. Glimpses of ghostly figures slipping through the woods. Once, a hiker had vanished without a trace, swallowed by the mountains like a breath in the wind. The local townsfolk never spoke of it, but you could feel their eyes following you, as if they knew more than they let on about those who wandered too far into the bush. Those who ventured to the edge of the valley seldom returned the same. The sense of something more sinister permeated the air, thickening with every crackle of the fire. Whispers. A woman claimed she saw a wild pair of eyes staring from the underbrush, glinting like polished stones. An old man from the valley told tales of strange markings found on the trees, symbols said to ward off the feral people who roamed at night. Stories escalated into warnings. The air crackled with fear, the kind that coils tightly in your gut, leaving a lump in your throat. "You hear them breathing," Jake's friend, Tim, said, a tremble in his voice. "They sit just beyond the light, waiting." Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With his heart pounding, Jake stood, peering into the darkness. The trees loomed like watchers, their gnarled branches stretching out as if to ensnare the unwary. Beyond the reach of the firelight, something moved. A rustle. A breath, or was it a whispering wind? Time seemed to freeze as all eyes turned to the shadow. Was it the tales? Or was something far more real lurking just out of sight? At that moment, Jake felt an unsettling pull, like gravity shifting beneath his feet. What if the stories were more than just folklore? What if he was about to discover the truth of the feral people? The tension was thick, heavy, almost electric. What might lie hidden in the deep, dark night? A sharp crack echoed through the stillness, seizing Jake's breath. His heart pounded in his chest as he gripped the flashlight tighter, water pooling in his eyes. The others shifted uneasily, whispering anxious words to one another, but Jake's focus narrowed to the shadow beyond the fire. Fear knotted through him like a tight rope, slicing through the unease that settled over their gathering. Suddenly, from the depths of the trees, a figure stepped into view. It was tall and gaunt, skin pale as moonlight. Long hair hung over its face, making it look almost spectral. The campfire flickered in response, casting erratic shadows that danced around the creature. Jake felt the breath leave his lungs as the being hesitated, staring deep into his soul. "Tim, is this part of the story?" He blurted out, his voice raw. But Tim's face was ashen, his lips pressed tight as he shook his head, eyes wide with terror. A howl echoed again, closer now, more deliberate. This time the sound seemed like a call, a beckoning from the depths of the forest. The figure took a jerky step forward, and in that moment, Jake caught a glimpse of its eyes sunken, wild, and full of primal focus. It felt less like a human and more like a manifestation of the wildness that surrounded them, a creature forged from nightmares. "Guys, we need to go, now." Jake felt heat rising in his throat, the fight-or-flight response surging through him. He turned toward the campsite, heart racing, urging everyone to grab their things. But the group was frozen, paralyzed by fear and the silence that followed. The figure darted back into the woods. In its wake, a chill swept past, stirring the campfire's embers, sending them spiraling into the night sky. Panic surged as the friends exchanged glances, realizing that whatever they had witnessed was far from ordinary. Maybe it's just a person lost in the woods. Someone ventured, voice shaky. There's no one out here, it's midnight. Tim hissed back, the weight of the moment bearing down on him. We need to run. Just as Jake took a step back toward the woods, the howl erupted again, louder, more menacing. It was no longer a call, it was a threat, a warning that something, or someone, was now onto them. Let us go, shouted Jess, her voice breaking. She turned and sprinted, the rest of the group following suit as they tore into the tree line. The path ahead twisted and turned, and the darkness felt alive, watching, waiting. Branches reached out, clawing at their clothes, a whisper of rage in the night air. The night air turned frigid as they ran, their breaths visible like ghosts, each inhalation a reminder of the primal fear clawing at their chests. The sounds of the forest morphed, the rustling leaves became footsteps, snapping twigs were if they were pursuing specters. Jake risked a glance over his shoulder. The forest seemed to pulse with energy. He could have sworn there were shadows weaving between the trees, moving faster than they were. They were being hunted. Keep moving, he shouted, pushing them harder, though panic gripped at his core, twisting his thoughts. Was it just stories? Or were the tales of the feral people, the ones vanishing into the night, all too real? They burst into a clearing, moonlight flooding around them, their breath coming in gasps, eyes darting. The world felt like it had collapsed around them. Behind them, the rustlings intensified, growing closer. This wasn't some ordinary forest. This was a wild realm, one they weren't meant to invade. As they stumbled, something caught the glint of moonlight and Jake froze. Markings scarred the trees, resembling symbols that twisted into cryptic patterns as if to warn them. Were they signs left by those who came before, or something menacing, a message from the feral people? But before he could think deeper, a scream shattered the night, piercing through the disorientation and fear that tangled him. Run! Tim screamed, pulling Jake back to the present. Something was in the woods waiting, stalking, but how much further could they go? The hunt was on, and they weren't just running for their lives anymore. They were about to discover the truth behind those nightmares. What lay ahead? Would they find safety, or something more harrowing? As they plunged deeper into the darkness, a chilling thought echoed in Jake's mind. What if the depths of those woods held answers he wasn't prepared to find? Branches whipped against Jake's face as they sprinted deeper into the heart of the forest. Each step felt heavier, weighed down by the fear clawing at him from within. The howl, oh God, the howlet punctuated the heavy silence of the night, wrapping around them like chains, keeping them tethered to their impending doom. Over there! Jess shouted, pointing toward a faint glow just off the path. It flickered like a beacon, but was it hope or a trap? Nonetheless, desperation pushed them toward it, the idea of safety gleaming in the dark. They stumbled into a small clearing. At its center stood a decaying cabin, its silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. The glow they saw was coming from a lantern hanging eerily from a hook on the porch. The wood groaned under the weight of time, as if it were warning them to turn back. Is it really abandoned? Tim whispered, his breath hitching in his throat. The group's hesitation was palpable, the earlier exhilaration replaced by uncertainty. Jake stepped forward, flashlight beam trembling in his grip, illuminating the cracked wooden boards. We can't stay out here, that thing is out there. He gestured back toward the tree line, where shadows melted into the dark, as if the forest itself was watching. Yeah, but what if it's not abandoned? Mark interjected, his voice barely above a murmur. What if whoever or whatever was in the woods is in there too? Better than being out here, Jess shot back, eyes wide and frantic. I'd rather take my chances inside. A chorus of indecision echoed among them, but the howl grew closer, snapping the moment of reasoning. They moved as one unit, propelled by fear, toward the cabin. As they reached the porch, an unearthly silence descended, seeming to swallow the night whole. Jake could practically feel the weight of the darkness, pressing in on all sides. Each creak of the wooden floor sounded like a gunshot in the stillness. They stepped into the cabin, hearts racing. It was dimly lit by the lantern, filling the room with a flickering glow that revealed just enough dusty furniture, cobwebs hanging like ghostly curtains, and remnants of what once might have been a home. "Is anyone here?" Jake called out into the shadows, but the only response was the crackle of the lantern. Suddenly, a loud thud resounded from the back of the cabin. They all jumped, freezing in place, breath caught in their throats. Every instinct screamed at them to run, but they couldn't tear their eyes away from the door leading to the darkened interior. "Hello?" Tim ventured, edging slowly toward the sound. A low growl rumbled, echoing through the cabin walls, and Jake's stomach twisted. Before they could react, the door flew open, slamming against the wall so hard it rattled dishes from shelves. A figure stood there, cloaked in shadows, eyes glowing like embers in the night. Tim stumbled back, heart racing. Who are you?" He stammered, but the figure remained silent, tilting its head slightly, as if curious. Jake's heart raced. They were too exposed. "We have to get out," he yelled, but before they could even think of escape, the lantern flickered violently and went out, plunging them into darkness. Panic erupted, screams mingling with the howls returning from the forest outside. The figure lunged forward, the glint of a knife flashing into view, and then silence again. As the cold dark enveloped them, pressing in from all sides, Jake felt a chill grip him, as if the forest had come alive. What had they wandered into? He felt the unmistakable weight of dread settle over them. "Hold on, guys." Jake felt around, trying to find his bearings, but the air was thick with terror. A sudden crash came from the rear of the cabin. Was it an animal? Or something far more sinister? Their breaths mixed with the sounds of the forest. What waited outside was horrifying, but could they survive whatever haunted this cabin? The moment of truth had come, and everything teetered on the edge of the unknown. As darkness pressed against them, Jake whispered into the void, "What haven't we seen yet?" The real terror was just revealing itself, and the woods were waiting to make its claim. What hidden secrets would they unearth in the heart of the darkness? The silence was suffocating. There they stood, huddled together, breaths shallow and rapid, listening for any sound that might signal their doom. In that agonizing pause, the darkness seemed to pulse, alive with their collective fear. "Is everyone okay?" Jess whispered, but her voice was nearly swallowed by the gloom. The only response she got was a pathetic nod from Tim, his eyes wide, searching for something that wasn't there. Jake shifted his weight, forcing himself to break the paralyzing silence. "We need to find a way to get out of here." He squinted into the inky blackness, wishing he could see anything except that terrifying figure from before. "We can't just burst out there," Mark exclaimed, lowering his voice to a frantic whisper. "Whatever that thing is, it's waiting for us." A soft sound came from the back of the room, a scraping noise. It was faint, but it grew louder, resonating against the walls that now felt like they were closing in on them. Jake held his breath, every nerve in him screaming to flee, but where could they go? "Maybe it's just a rat," Jess offered, her voice brittle and shaking. "Not a chance," Tim replied, his voice laced with dread. "That growl, it wasn't a rat." Before they could process this, the lantern sputtered back to life, casting an eerie light across their surroundings. They gasped together, the glow revealing the figure standing just out of reach. The person wore tattered clothes and had wild hair, dirt smeared their face, illuminated as if the light had summoned them. But it wasn't just the dirt. Their eyes looked almost feral, more animal than human. "Who are you?" Jake stammered, backing into Jess, the warmth of her body offering little comfort. "I am the keeper of these woods," the figure rasped, voice grating like stones grinding together. "You shouldn't have come here." Panic twisted Jake's insides like a vice. "What do you want from us?" He shot back, trying to mask the terror shaking his voice. "We didn't mean any harm." The keeper smiled, a twisted grin filled with something dark. Harm. You brought it with you. Unexpectedly, a loud crash echoed from the front, the door smashed against the wall as if something else was trying to break in. The keeper turned, eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. Run! Jake shouted, confusion and adrenaline fueling his urgency. In a blinding flash, they darted toward the door, but the keeper moved swiftly, blocking their exit. Tim, too panicked to think straight, lunged forward and collided with the figure, sending both crashing to the ground. Get out! Go! Tim cried as he wrestled with the keeper, desperately trying to wrestle free. Jake grabbed Jess and Mark by the arms, dragging them toward the opening. The howl from outside grew louder, echoing through the cabin like a death knell, a chilling reminder of the danger lurking just beyond the threshold. As they burst through the door, the tree limbs seemed to writhe. Shadows danced, merging, shifting under the pale moonlight. But the way ahead was unclear, sounds of the forest were now alive around them, a cacophony that set their hearts pounding. Mark turned back for one last glance, only to find the keeper standing, serene and still, a predator surveying its prey. And then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled with the pounding of something enormous approaching from the depths of the woods. Come on! We have to move! Jake shouted, yanking Jess into motion as they fled into the depths of the murky forest, leaving the cabin and its horrors behind. But as they ran deeper, a chilling realization hit Jake hard: they were not alone. The growls were closer now, the shadows closing in. He could feel eyes on them, a lurking presence following, waiting for the right moment to strike. With every step, he could almost hear the whispers of the woods calling out, claiming them. What if we're just running into something worse? Jess gasped, panting hard. That question hung in the air, heavy with dread, echoing an unsettling truth: perhaps the nightmare had only just begun. What unspeakable terrors had they awakened in the heart of that forest? And were they really safe at all? Jake felt the ground tremble beneath his feet, sending tremors of panic racing up his spine. They ran, dodging branches that reached out like skeletal fingers, the shadows dancing around them as if mocking their mindless flight. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the brush, sent them into further fits of terror. They were not alone, that much was clear. The growls grew louder, more sinister, echoing the wild heartbeat of the forest. The darkness whispered that something was hunting them. Something keenly aware of their every move. Faster! Mark shouted, forcing his legs to pump harder. We can't let it catch us. Where do we even go? Jess cried, her breath ragged, fear warping her voice. We're running blind out here. Jake turned briefly to look back. The trees swayed, the shadows merging, forming shapes that seemed to stretch out hungrily. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. We need to find shelter. Anywhere. Mark, already blurting out panic-fueled words, interrupted. What if it's waiting in there? What if shut up? Tim snapped, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes were wide with terror but somehow also fiercely determined. Keep running. The woods closed in around them, the air thickening as they fell deeper into the forest. Jake could hear the feral growls behind them now, a guttural symphony of pure instinct. It was drawing nearer, and with every beat of his heart, he could feel that instinct urging him to fight or flee. Ahead, a dark structure loomed, half hidden between the trees, a dilapidated barn that looked like it had been long abandoned. It wasn't perfect, but it was a place to hide. In there! Jake shouted, pointing as he led the charge. They slipped inside, stumbling over the uneven floorboards, their frantic breaths echoing in the empty space. The stale scent of hay and rot mixed in the air, making Jake gag. The shadows were thicker here, cocooning them in darkness once more. Tim pressed himself against the wall, wild eyes darting to the door as they heard the growls stop outside. Did we lose it? He whispered, voice trembling. I don't know, Jess panted, her face pale. The noises, they could be anywhere. Moments ticked by like hours. The silence was oppressive, broken only by their ragged breaths. Then, a sudden thump against the barn door shattered the calm, followed by a low growl that vibrated within Jake's chest. A horrible sound, heavy and mocking, clawed at the edges of his sanity. "It's here!" Mark hissed, a fresh wave of fear washing over him. The door creaked ominously under the weight of whatever was outside. A clawed hand, dirty and gnarled, pressed flat against the wood. The barn trembled with new life. The unseen creature was trying to get in. They were trapped, the space shrinking around them. "What do we do?" Tim moaned, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What happens if it gets in?" "We fight." Jake responded, adrenaline hammering in his veins. He needed them to believe they could escape, even if the odds were against them. He scanned the barn hastily, searching for anything they could use. But the barn was empty. Void of hope. Only decay surrounded them. A piercing scream broke through the suffocating air, a shrill cry unlike anything they had ever heard before. It shattered the momentary silence and sent their hearts racing once more. "Cover your ears!" Jake shouted, but the terror had already seeped into the marrow of their bones. The door splintered as something outside slammed into it again, the sound echoing like thunder. The moment felt stretched, suspended in a fragile dance between horror and reality. Would their courage hold against the darkness waiting to swallow them whole? Just then, something shifted in the shadows nearby. A figure emerged, a face they almost recognized, twisted and wild. It was human, yet not, its grin splitting wide like a crescent moon. "Welcome to my farm," it whispered, and Jake's blood ran cold. What newfound terror awaited them, and would they ever find a way out of this nightmare? The figure in the shadows stepped forward, the distorted smile widening until it stretched impossibly large. The barn creaked with an unease that matched the monster's grinning face. Jake's heart raced as recognition flickered through him like a lightning bolt. Was that Gabe? He choked out, voice barely above a whisper. The memory of his old friend felt like a ghost slipping through his fingers. But this was not his Gabe. The eyes that met his were wild, devoid of humanity, glimmering with a primal hunger. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure rasped, each word coated in malice. "The farm has its ways." Beside Jake, Tim gasped, eyes darting nervously between Jake and the figure. "What did they do to him?" His voice trembled like a leaf in the wind. "Doesn't matter," Jess hissed, gripping Tim's arm painfully. "We need to focus on getting out." She was shaken but held on to the glimmer of hope like a lifeline. The growls outside escalated, their guttural sounds mixing with a chorus of haunting laughter that echoed around them, as if the very walls were alive and gloating at their misfortune. The creature before them jerked towards the door, its grin faltering slightly, and then back at the group, eyes brimming with a frenzied light. "They want to play," it said, licking its lips, an unsettling glint in its eye. Suddenly, Jake felt a surge of determination surge within him, ignited by the realization that they couldn't let this twisted version of Gabe keep them paralyzed in fear. "We have to distract it," Jake whispered urgently, thoughts racing. He spotted a rusted pitchfork propped up against a wall, shadows weaving around it like a sinister dance partner. If he could just get to it. Mark glanced at Jake, understanding flashing in his eyes. "On three?" he mouthed, and Jake nodded, heart pounding in unison with the growls outside. 1, 2, 3. Jake lunged for the pitchfork, and Mark's voice rang like a clarion call, breaking through the dense air. "Hey! Freak!" Jake shouted, reeling as he brandished the pitchfork threateningly before him. The creature turned, eyes narrowing, a sneer morphing as it hissed in surprise. In that moment, the barn's door buckled again, wood splintering under relentless force. "Go!" Jess cried, bolting for the rear wall as the others followed suit. They could hear the creature snapping at their heels. It moved with a speed that shouldn't belong to anything human. Jake shoved the pitchfork into Tim's hands, urging him to stand his ground. "Protect Jess. I'll try to hold it back." But just as he took a step forward, shadows erupted from behind him. Another figure clawed its way into the barn, and this one was far more monstrous than the first. It was large, distorted, its limbs twisting oddly, dragging dirt and decay with every step. Its breath came in feral growls, and its eyes glowed with madness. "Jake!" Tim shouted, panic filling his voice. Jake's heart sank. There was no way out. Not here. Not now. He had to think. The shadows were closing in, and the barn, once offering hollow refuge, stood as a coffin, threatening to swallow them whole. "Maybe we can break through the back," Mark shouted, but the words sounded futile against the throaty laughter that surrounded them, reverberating through their very bones. The creature lunged, the darkness thickening, wrapping around Jake like a suffocating blanket. He braced himself, bile rising in his throat. But then, as if fate intervened, a loud crash reverberated from the barn door. It buckled again, and amidst the chaos, an unexpected burst of light spilled in, momentarily blinding everyone. "Run!" A deep, booming voice thundered through the door. Instinct screamed at Jake. He had to move. But as he turned to grab Jess's hand, he froze, mouth agape as the figure in the shadows recoiled in horror from the light, its sneer morphing into an expression of pure rage. "I want to let you leave," it howled, and Jake realized with sickening disappointment that this nightmare hadn't even begun. Outside, hope clashed with dread, but the voice from the light grew louder, propelling them forward. What awaited them on the other side, and would they ever escape the twisted nightmare of the farm? The burst of light spilled into the barn like a sunrise breaking the grip of a stormy night. It flickered against the creatures, momentarily casting them into shadowy corners. Jake barely had time to register the booming voice. His instinct kicked in, and he lunged toward Jess, feeling the heat of the light on his skin, desperate to pull her into safety. "Go! Move!" he shouted, urgency slicing through the chaos. Jess hesitated, wide-eyed and trembling, torn between the darkness behind her and the intense glare in front. But Mark, with newfound resolve, bolted forward, adrenaline pumping through him. "We can't waste time," he yelled, grabbing Jess by the wrist, and together they surged toward the door. The monstrous shadow lunged, its shriek a twisted echo that clawed through the air. With fury, it erupted toward them, its grotesque form a nightmare made flesh. Just a heartbeat away from Jake and Jess, the creature shattered into the light's embrace and recoiled, as if struck. "Keep going," Jake urged, feeling a mixture of fear and hope bubble within him. That he pushed through the threshold, Jess and Tim right behind him, but just as he crossed into the daylight, the darkness seemed to burst in retribution. The barn behind them was a cacophony of shrieks and growls, a violent symphony marking their escape. As they tumbled into the open air, the world outside felt impossibly bright, contrasting sharply with the sinister shadow they left behind. The grass beneath their feet was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of rain. But the relief was short-lived. Surrounding the barn, a tangled landscape twisted in chaos and confusion, weeds reaching skyward, trees twisting unnaturally like skeletal fingers grasping for the heavens. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath them. A series of low growls circled like distant drums, announcing the approach of more horrors. Jake turned, glancing back at the barn, half expecting it to launch forth another creature, but nothing came. "For now. Where do we go?" Tim gasped, panting heavily. His eyes darted to the tree line, an impenetrable wall of darkness lurking behind the pale light of dusk. "Into the woods," Mark proclaimed with urgency, but uncertainty flickered across his face. "We need to regroup. Find a place to hide." Jess's hand clutched her chest, but she squared her shoulders. "We can't just stand here. Whatever's in there, it's still coming for us." The shadows within the forest beckoned, dark and deep, a world of unknowns lined with danger. But the thought of returning to the barn, to the gnarled faces that had once recognized them as friends, felt even more repulsive. With one final glance back, they sprinted towards the trees. Each step sent cold tendrils of terror creeping up Jake's spine. The growls morphed into frantic screeches, some too close to be ignored. As they plunged into the underbrush, the branches snagged at their clothes, seemed to pull them back into the darkness. Fear twisted fiercely in Jake's stomach, the haunting laughter of the creatures resonating in his ears. It wasn't just a game, this was life and death, and he was playing for keeps. The woods closed around them, the light dimming, swallowed whole by towering trees. Jake shuddered as he lost track of time and space, their surroundings twisted into a maze of shadows. A shriek thundered from behind, making them stumble, and they cowered against a tree, hearts thundering like a war drum. "We can't go back," Tim whispered, looking desperately at each of them, "but where do we go?" Jake clenched his fists, knowing he had to make a decision. They needed a plan, a way to fortify themselves against what lurked in the darkness. There's got to be something out here, a cabin, a structure, anything. Suddenly, the eerie wind brought a whisper, soft and enticing. "Find us." With a frisson of anxiety prickling at his neck, Jake stared into the gnarled woods, dread coiling tighter. What awaited them on this twisted path? What other horrors had the farm unleashed upon the world? "Please, let us just keep moving," Jess urged, already pulled into action. And as they veered deeper into the shadows, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, something far more malicious than before. Far from the barn, he felt the pulse of danger, the promise of the unknown lurking just ahead. What awaited them in the depths of the forest? The further they pressed into the woods, the more Jake felt the weight of the darkness pressing down on them. The trees were thick, their branches woven together like skeletal fingers closing in, and the deeper they went, the thicker the air became. It stung desperately in their throats and made it hard to breathe. "Can we stop for a second?" Tim panted, his legs trembling. "Just a moment to catch our breath." "No." Mark hissed, his eyes wide with fear. "We can't. We have to keep moving." Just then, a sudden rustle came from the underbrush just a few feet away. Everyone froze, hearts pounding in unison. Jake squinted into the shadows, trying to make out whatever might be lurking just beyond the light filtering in. "Did you hear that?" Jess whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Shoo!" Jake hissed back. "We don't know if it's them," but before he could finish, the rustling intensified, and a figure burst forth from the thicket. It was a man, wild-eyed and ragged, his clothes torn and filthy. His hair hung long and matted, streaked with sap and dirt, and he bore a gruesome smile that revealed teeth stained by something Jake hoped wasn't blood. "Lost, are we?" The stranger cackled, voice a mix of madness and malice. Jake instinctively took a step back, adrenaline surging through him. But Mark, fueled by an unseen courage, pushed in front of Jess. "We're not lost. We're looking for shelter." The man's smile widened, eyes glinting like shards of glass. "Shelter? Oh, you'll find more than that in these woods. Much more." With that, he turned and darted into the darkness, laughter echoing behind him. Each of them felt a chill at the sound, an invitation or a warning. "We should follow him," Mark suggested. "No way." Jess protested, gripping Jake's arm tightly. "We're not going into more danger." Jake, feeling torn, stared at Mark. The need for safety clawed in his chest against the urge to find a way back to the barn, back where the shadows hadn't yet betrayed them. But the gut feeling in his stomach was clear. "We stick together," he asserted. "What if he leads us to a safe place? Or right into their hands?" Tim interjected, panic rising in his voice. The decision hung heavy in the air as another growl rumbled from somewhere unseen. The chaos of the farm seemed to shift outside the bounds of their troubling memories, and now, reality struck them like an icy blade. The man's laughter echoed once more, this time closer. A rustling came at their backs, louder and desperate, and Jake could tell the forest wasn't finished playing its games. Something was hunting them, not just the figure in the woods, but something darker, more sinister that stirred in the underbrush. "There. We need to go," Jess said urgently, pointing toward a dimly lit path breaking through the undergrowth. Without waiting for a reply, she began to move, the moments of indecision evaporating as unexpected instinct took hold. "Wait!" Mark shouted. "We can't," but before he could finish, Jake grabbed him, thrusting them into a hurried escape once more, and they followed Jess's lead down the narrow pathway. As they ran, the sounds of the forest consumed them, the growls, the shrieks, and that haunting laughter which weaved fear into the very heart of their panic. What had they stumbled into? With adrenaline coursing through him, Jake realized the woods were far more than just trees. They breathed, lived, and watched as they stepped further into the darkness. Suddenly, a soft glimmer caught his eye among the twisted trails, a flicker of light. Jake thought back to the mysterious voice. "Find us." Was the fire beckoning them forward? Or was it a trap, a lure to the very heart of their nightmares? They pressed on, bound by fear but desperate for answers. What awaited them at the end of the path? Was it salvation or their final doom? They burst from the gloom and landed into a clearing bathed in an eerie, silver light. It was a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness they had just fled. Before them stood an ancient cabin, its door hanging ajar as if inviting them inside. The flickering glow that had beckoned them was emanating from within. "Should we go in?" Tim's voice trembled, a mix of hope and fear threading its way through his words. Mark shook his head. "We can't split up." "What if that guy or something worse?" Jess interjected, her eyes scanning the tree-line as if expecting a shadow to pounce at any moment, but Jake felt a pull toward the cabin. A desperate curiosity urged him forward. "We might find something useful inside or someone who can help." Jess couldn't bear to imagine facing whatever hidden nightmares lay beyond the trees. "No. We should keep moving." The faintest whisper of a wind rustled through the leaves, as if the forest itself were debating their next move. Mark glanced nervously from the entrance of the cabin to the menacing trees behind them. "We're already so deep in, maybe it's worth a shot." The sounds of the forest grew more agitated, growls, howls, and the unseen creatures stirring in the shadows. The laughter of the man still echoed in Jake's ears, a sinister reminder of the danger they just evaded. Without another moment to spare, he took a step forward. "We're going in." Tim swallowed hard but followed, compelled by a blend of fear and loyalty. Jess clenched her fists, fighting against her own instincts. "Jake, wait." But it was too late. The door creaked open, and the scent of damp earth filled their lungs. Inside, shadows danced against the walls as the flicker of a fire illuminated the room. A single figure sat in front, wrapped in a tattered blanket, their features obscured by the flickering wood. The room felt alive, vibrating with a tension that prickled Jake's skin. "Who dares enter my domain?" croaked a raspy voice, slicing through the stillness like a knife. Jake and the others froze. The figure turned slowly, revealing hollow cheeks and wild eyes that gleamed with an unnatural light. "You seek shelter, but refuge comes with a price. What do you want?" Tim asked, his voice shaky. "Your stories, your fears. Offer them to me, and I shall hide you from the terrors that lurk outside." The figure smiled, revealing teeth that were more animal than human. Fear lodged deep in Jake's throat. "What if we refuse?" "You'll face the wrath of the woods." The figure's happiness twisted into something grotesque. "And the woods always get what they want." A chill swept over them, as if the air had grown ice cold. It seemed that the unknown horrors outside paled in comparison to the unsettling man before them. "What kind of stories?" Mark pressed, trying to stall for time. "Ah, tales of loss, of horror, of despair. The woods relish in your dread." The figure leaned forward, eyes gleaming with hunger. "Tell me, or be consumed by the darkness that you dread most." The weight of the choice settled heavily on Jake's chest, and he felt the air thin as doubts coalesced. How could they trade the very essence of their souls for safety? As Jess took a step back, a loud crash erupted from outside, splintering the silence. The front of the cabin shuddered, and something massive slammed against the walls. "Quick! We need to decide," Jake urged, heart racing. The creature outside howled, a terrifying sound that echoed through the clearing, shaking the very foundation of the cabin. What lay beyond the door? Was it a hunt, something that would come for them next? Jake's mind raced. Should they trust the figure, or confront whatever was waiting at the threshold? The tension mounted, and the fiery glint in the figure's eyes signaled a truth he wasn't ready to confront. Would they sacrifice their peace of mind for mere survival, or risk everything for a chance to escape the wood's impending doom? As the door shuddered yet again, rattling on its hinges, Jake knew they had mere moments to choose their fate. What final decision would bind their souls, and would it even set them free? The air grew thick with unspoken fear as they huddled in the cabin, the figure's haunting gaze compelling them to respond. The thrumming heartbeat of the woods pulsed louder outside. Growls, scratches, and ghastly howls echoed like a horrific symphony. It was clear they had no time to waste. "Tell me your fears." The figure croaked, voice quaking with an ominous excitement that seeped into Jake's bones. He felt cornered, trapped in a game he didn't choose to play. But time was running out, and the clamoring shadows outside were demanding their moment to strike. "Enough!" Jake shouted, surprising himself as the words burst forth from his mouth. "We won't trade our fears for safety. That's not how this works." The ferocity in his voice ignited something brave inside him, pushing aside the terror that had wrapped around him like vines. "You think we're afraid of stories? We're afraid of being trapped here with you." The figure's face twisted into a snarl. "Foolish boy. The woods have a taste for fear, and it will find you," it hissed, the darkness behind it swirling like a storm. The cabin quaked yet again with another crash against the door, wood splintering under the relentless force of whatever pursued them. Jake exchanged desperate glances with Jess, Tim, and Mark, and realization dawned like a tiny flicker of hope: they needed to act, together. "Don't let it get to you." Tim spoke up, dread coursing through his veins but determination pushing through the cracks. "We're not your puppets." His voice rang out, and the group's shared fear morphed into a desperate resolve. "All right," Jess nodded, stepping forward, "enough of the games. I think it's time we turn the tables." She shot a glance toward the flickering fire in the corner. "If these woods want our stories, let us give them something they'll never forget." At that moment, the monster at the door howled again, punctuating their decision. Jake's heart thundered. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jess said, throwing caution to the wind, "instead of sharing our fears, let's show them who we are. Let us tell them about the things we've overcome, the strength we carry." "You want stories?" She let out a slow breath, casting her fiery determination toward the figure. "I'll tell you a story about how I hiked up this mountain with my family, how we laughed and feasted under the stars. There's joy in the darkness, you know. We won't let you steal that from us." The figure sneered, but something flickered behind its eyes, an unease as if it had never encountered this kind of defiance or resilience before. The wood trembled again with a deafening crash, but Jake felt a shift. Fear started to recede, replaced by a spark of courage. "Jess is right," he yelled as he felt the weight of his friend's support. "Let us tell our stories. Of laughter. Of friendship. Of passion." He stepped forward, pouring his heart into those words, the kind that could light even the darkest night. "Our love for life cannot be taken away." Tim and Mark joined in, filling the space with their voices, each story a small act of rebellion against the primal terror outside. They spoke about joyous moments, dreams yet to be fulfilled, and the strength that comes from unity. The figure's face twisted in frustration, shadows fleeing from the light in their voices, as if the simple addition of hope drove back the darkness. The growls outside faded, merging into an unintelligible murmur. "We will not be overcome." They shouted together, a full-throated declaration that rang through the eerie cabin. The woods echoed back their resolve as the pounding at the door halted completely. With one final, monstrous shriek, the shadowy creature paused, then retreated from the doorway, leaving the cabin in an uneasy quiet. The figure, now looking pain-stricken, stepped back, shadows shrinking as if drawn into the light of their spirits. "You think this victory will last?" It spat, voice quivering. "The woods remember. But, as its words fell flat, the figure seemed less menacing, almost human behind its wild demeanor. As the heavy silence settled, Jake felt hope surge in his chest. Their voices had delivered them something pure. They might not have defeated the haunting figures in the woods, but they had discovered their strength. A collective realization pulsed through them, a bond forged in the face of darkness. "We'll find our way out," Jake whispered, looking at Jess, then Tim and Mark. "Together." As they emerged into the twilight, the woods still loomed, but they felt less ominous, less suffocating now that they forged their own path. The forest, still alive with unseen creatures, could watch. But they had stories worth telling. There was danger ahead, and the shadows would linger, but the true victory was within them. They had returned what the woods hadn't taken, their voices, their will, and their stories. Now, they had the strength to face whatever lay ahead, and as they stepped through the tree line, Jake turned back as if to reaffirm one last time that the forest could not own them. What awaited might still be unknown, but holding on to each other was everything. You need to subscribe now to stay connected to more exclusive stories like this one. Smash the like button instantly to keep the algorithm lively, and don't forget to flood the comments section with your thoughts. We want to hear your reactions and theories about this wild conclusion. You don't want to miss out. This is the moment to show your support and share this video with at least 5 friends who need to catch this thrilling conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the word.